how to take forward the issue of integrating loss and damage into national planning and also disaster risk management. To also consider the issue of expanding access pathways to subnational actors and even communities for loss and damage finance, but also trying to find ways on how to align national action with Africa's collective negotiating strategy for COP32. So I will start with Harjeet online with a question to you. The audience, please also pay attention. You also be given your chance to actually pose a question or even respond to some of the questions. And I also recognize that there are also other people online who can also raise a question, but also even make an input. So Harjeet, to you, just wanted to check what are the minimum governance or fiduciary systems that are essential under the Barbados implementation modality. We know this is a new baby on board, but we still need to panel beat it and make sure that it grows to a level that we all want it to be. So over to you, Harjeet. Thank you. Thank you. So while Natasha is moving to the podium, I want to turn to Keith Mackay from the Scottish Government. You also have your fair share of questions too. The first one, just to build on what Harjit has said, as funders, I just wanted to know from you. We know funders increasingly require credible and also comparable evidence to release loss and damage finance. So from the contributors' point of view, what builds confidence in a national system? So over to you, Keith. heard from the concern worldwide to ensure there's last mile delivery. So over to you, Natasha.
Thank you very much, moderator. Indeed, most of the funding mechanisms are very centralized, and to make sure that the fund for responding to loss and damage is integrated, I think the first step is to strengthen governance structures, especially those at local level, because that's the first step to make sure that it's accessed by local people. We need to have structures that, first of all, understand what loss and damage is, and they also have the capacity to manage, to plan, budget, as well as implement disaster risk management activities, especially recovery intervention after disaster event, but also to decentralize, to have fiscal decentralization in a way that the resources should not be concentrated at the center. So already government should have funding mechanisms that are decentralized up to the district level, as well as down to the community, as long as their structures are well capacitated in terms of fiscal management to manage those funding and also implement recovery interventions. So it's very important that these structures should be empowered financially to manage, to plan their own recovery interventions and implement them. Also, we have to use a bottom-up approach where we implement community-owned interventions. So the interventions that are being implemented should come from the community themselves. They know better what affects them. They know better their needs. So we have to make sure that they are involved at every step, not taking the interventions to them, but we should learn from them, plan with them, implement with them. And lastly, there should also be transparency and accountability, in the sense that when the resources have been decentralized, the community level, the affected people know how much has been decentralized, and what has the resources, what the resources have been spent on, and also we have to declare every resource that we have mobilized and how we have used them, and we also have to learn from them if they are satisfied in the way the resources have been managed. So by doing that, we will definitely have the funds for responding to loss and damage integrated in the fiscal mechanisms available in the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. I think there are institutional challenges that countries face, especially in coordinating loss and damage across ministries. Over to you, before we clap hands for you.
Thank you, moderator, for that question. Of course, there are so many institutional challenges that we face. more especially when we're talking about interministerial implementation of recovery interventions. The first would be weak coordination among the ministries as well as the partners, as we know that each and every ministry or organization, they have their core responsibilities, they have their core functions. And with the existence, for example, in Malawi, with the existence of DODIMA as the National Coordinating Agency for Disaster Risk Management, the understanding of some ministries is that anything to do with disaster risk management, anything to do with disasters, losses, damages, and recovery is the business of DODIMA. And they expect that DODIMA should cover all the ministries as far as disaster management is concerned. But disaster management is everyone's responsibility. So the ministries, different organizations, they should be able to plan and also respond to disaster losses and damages, as well as recover from them without expecting DODIMA to come provide resources for them. That's the first problem. And this is mainly because disaster risk management is not well mainstreamed in the government ministries and departments. I think the second one is that loss and damage assessments is relatively new, meaning that we have low capacity, technical capacity in terms of conducting assessments. For example, I would say that previously, for us to conduct a PDNA that help us to quantify the losses, damages, as well as the recovery needs, we've been relying on external experts that were coming to support us. So for departments to conduct post-disaster needs assessment to quantify, to calculate and quantify the needs, as well as the damages, the losses, as well as the recovery needs, is difficult. And because of that, there is poor coordination because of that capacity gap. Ministries are not able to conduct the assessment on their own. And also there's resource competition within the different ministries. The allocation, funding allocation that ministries get is not sufficient. So for them to prioritize issues of disaster is a challenge because they have their own core activities to prioritize. So in that event, when DODIMA does not provide the resources, it means that issues of disaster recovery is not prioritized. And the other and last issue is the issue of donor or political influence, where they are shifting priorities. Mostly when we get funding from donors, they dictate on how and where the resources ought to be spent. So sometimes we have ministries have their priorities, but because they are restricted because of donor conditions, issues of priority issues are left out. So these are some of the issues that affect the institutional challenges that we face, and also affect disaster recovery interventions. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Let's give a round of applause to Natasha as I transition to Victor Moore from the Eagles Relief and Development, who's one of the implementing partners of the Concern Worldwide on this very important community disaster fund. So Victor, here we are. Loss and damage realities often include non-economic but also social impacts. How do the CDFs empower communities to define their own priorities in ways that that traditional top-down aid might miss?
Thanks, Julius, our moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. Are we still here? So welcome. We're discussing something very important here, and hopefully we can learn together and get feedback as well from the floor. The question is quite critical in the, if you look at the way we do development projects, not to mention disaster management interventions that we do. CDF really have the potential, and they do empower communities, and in a way that enables communities' own priorities to be taken on board and to be actually implemented, as compared to traditional top-down approaches. So let me just highlight something very interesting here. From our experiences working with communities, from our previous speakers that have also taken the floor, many a time donors, when they come with aid, I normally say, not only do they try to donate funds, they sometimes, unfortunately sometimes, some donors, not the ones who are in the room, but some donors, they also end up donating solutions. You can never donate solutions. They have to be defined by the people themselves. An analogy I like to give is, have we not at times given a community a size 4 shoe when their feet are size 7? But you still want them to wear it and take photos. By that I'm simply mean, because if it's top down, sometimes they will not match with the actual community realities. When they define it themselves, and in CDF specifically it's a bottom-up approach, they know their shoe size, and therefore they will tell you that, okay, size 4 won't fit me, rather I am a size 7. So what does that mean? It means that in CDF these are bottom-up approaches, and also it fits pretty well with our localization agenda. It empowers communities to own their situation. They understand the hazards in a way we don't normally do. Why? Because most of the hazards we're facing, even the flooding we have, it has a past element to it, but we won't really see what's happening now. They understand it 30 years ago, 40 years ago, so they understand the context better than in the traditional top-up approaches. And then also it empowers them in the sense that they own those interventions, and they manage them themselves, and there is community-based accountability around it. So I would say in a traditional top-down, you will miss out the context, you will prescribe solutions that will not be effective, and they will not be sustainable. In CDF, we are finding interventions that they have done. They have done flood dikes, for instance, and they position them in ways we would not have determined ourselves. And it is found that it's more sustainable because it's also monitored by the people themselves. I'll stop there for now.
No, thank you so much. We don't want to go that route, but maybe can you just confirm to us that can community disaster funds serve as the credible, accredited national channel for fund for responding to loss and damage?
It definitely can. Thanks so much for that question. CDF, or Community Disaster Funds, can serve as an accredited national delivery channel. In the case in point for EGOS, for instance, with our partner Concern Worldwide, not only did they start out in one district, it's already expanded to another district in Chikwawa, and where the mechanism actually involves not just the community structures, it also involves district-based departments, where there is actually, we've set up a CDF task force, where you have got district planning officers, district disaster risk management officers, so different government departments that provide technical expertise are already there. And they are the ones also who do the vetting of the proposals. So as a matter of fact, that mechanism is already working. So you're integrating local and district level structures already. So therefore, it can work as an accredited national delivery channel. There are safeguards already built into it. Even quotations that are sourced, there's a procurement committee at community level. So they are actually trained and capacitated structures. And they are overseen at district level. Just like I've said, there's also accountability at a local level. So, and also that ties in well with the Disaster Trust Fund in the DRM Act 2023. And so that already provides a modality that's already is seen to be working, and it's already proven, and it can be scaled up further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think it deserves a round of applause. Are we together? Are we together in this room? I know you are burning, you have some questions, so, but let me ask first before I pass it to you. So, can you pass on the mic to Charles? Yeah, Charles, two questions for you. One is about learning from what is coming out from at national level. I think you can learn one or two things about the mechanisms that are there. So how can regional or national mechanisms ensure equity and justice in loss and damage financing? Over to you, Charles.
Thank you so much, moderator, for that question. But when I'm seated here, I'm just reflecting around the reason as to why this loss and damage facility became so necessary. Well, it's supposed actually to address those losses and damages really that are actually really beyond our capacity to actually adapt. And I'm looking at these losses and damages as those events really that would actually require very, very urgent redress. And reflecting around the Barbados mechanism and looking at the trajectory we are now taking, I'm finding it very difficult to reconcile what is already happening within the existing funds, like the GCF, like the Adaptation Fund, like the GEF, and the challenges that we have been lamenting about all through regarding access. I know since morning we've been talking about or lamenting about scarcity or inadequacy of the resources that already exist for loss and damage, and arguing that of course the 250 million really for the entire global south is really a drop in the ocean. But there's this question of access, even with the little that is available. And if we are going to make these modalities so complicated, it becomes then very, very, very difficult, for these resources to serve the purpose for which, this particular fund is actually created. So we really must first and foremost address the access issues. It takes you about 3 years or so between the time that you apply for funds to GCF and when you get the funds. And chances that you're going to get it are also determined on whether you're able to develop a bankable proposal. So are we taking the same trajectory now within the Barbados mechanism? I know we'll be having NDAs, again, for loss and damage, in the countries. But there's also aspect, of course, developing, the right documents, for you to be able to access. So I think the access issue, first and foremost, regardless of which mechanism you're talking about, is one thing that we must actually think about, deeply. But coming back to your question, I think for us to ensure that we have justice and that we have equity in whichever kind of mechanism we're talking about, we must embrace the tenets of procedural justice. In other words, we must actually focus more on inclusive governance, of the fund, for example. We must ensure that whatever proposals are coming through, whatever requests actually coming through, are actually informed by the reality on the ground, by the context. Somebody mentioned about it on the ground. How well are we focusing on what we're now calling, the last mile, kind of delivery? How are we ensuring that communities, really, the grassroots, really contribute in ensuring that governance, of the same resources really is actually being done correctly? But most importantly, also, are they involved, from the word go, in prioritization, of some of the projects that are needed in that particular regard? But again, it's also important to ensure that we have what we call radical transparency and accountability, and that is key, because, as it were, generally looking at the climate finance flow, basically from whichever pot you're talking about, data has it, and I think Mother can actually confirm that indeed it's only about 10% of the climate finance that actually reaches the frontline communities. And that is exactly what has been recorded. A lot of resources are actually lost in the bureaucracies, in the red tape that we do experience, all along. It's left within, other systems. And therefore, we must ensure that even the little that we are talking about reaches, the last mile communities by ensuring that we have proper transparency and accountability mechanisms. How are we able to track the flow of these resources and to ensure that it actually reaches the communities at the front line? We therefore require very, robust monitoring and tracking systems and frameworks, and those are key in ensuring that we are proceeding in that direction. But again, we need to ensure that we have coordinated action and investments again, because basically we are likely to experience again a lot of duplication in different ways, whether at national level or at regional level. We must ensure there's coordination of our action and again investment in that regard. Then, even if you're talking about regional or whatever other mechanisms that are available, we must also ensure that we really invest in local institutions and build their capacity in that regard. Because at the end of the day, everything must cascade down there. So local institutions really must be established, capacity build, and we must really invest a lot there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. I know you also touched on the issue of transparency, but also national level readiness. And my question was actually going towards that. How should African countries align national readiness with collective negotiation priorities in line with the issue of funding for responding to loss and damage? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Well, of course, we must align our national priorities, of course, with the negotiation processes. And I think as a members of the African fraternity, especially in the negotiation space, we must really ensure that we create, or we foster collaboration and team building, in terms of how then we approach issues. I know every country, of course, prior to COP, develop their own national, positions, but these national positions are also able to fit into regional, or African, position, of course, curated at the Africa group of negotiators. But it's important, even at a very national level, before we even come with our common, position, we must ensure that we actually do invest, a lot in also building our capacities, especially at national level. We must be able to ensure that we're able to develop our loss and damage plans, very, very critical at that particular level, and ensure that these plans, of course, like I did mention, are reflective, of the realities, on the ground. But at the same time, we must also ensure that we're able to build our capacities around post-disaster, for example, assessment. All this capacity at the moment is probably lacking. We must be able to consolidate and be able to ensure that these capacities are actually available. And again, we are also able to ensure that we're able to work on tracking mechanisms, for these events for loss and damage at the country level, so that even as we develop our national, position, that are going also now to make it now to the regional, position, we must ensure that this is actually informed by proper, capacity development around those particular areas in that particular level. But at the same time, we must also be able to collaborate, with the others in actually canvassing our position on loss and damage, particularly capitalization of the same. And I think this honor is actually on the shoulders of the Africa group of negotiators. But we must also be able to have support mechanism, for that institution, to be able to advocate for the continent and to be able to start with the Africa position, particular loss and damage. At the moment, again, we must also be able to, I want to use the word challenge cautiously, the distribution of this loss and damage. I'm sure, and I read somewhere that in actual sense, this fund is already kind of divided. There is a section going to probably the small IRAD states maybe, and this what is supposed now to be accessible to the others. I think we must also ensure there is equity, there is justice again in distribution of the cake, as it were, and this can actually be canvassed within that particular process. We have COP32 coming, and I think Philip mentioned about special needs for Africa as a matter of principle, as an issue that we actually, going to push through. So how do we ensure that within that framework of a negotiated, special needs circumstances for Africa, also cascade down and is reflected also in the loss and damage, FAD, for example, looking at the continent as a region that has special needs and circumstances. And therefore, even as we look at other funds, we must also look at loss and damage within that particular context. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Let's give him a round of applause. I most now humbly honored to introduce to you one of the board members of ACT Alliance at the global level, Mr. Milton Luhanga, who is going to also help us to answer one of the questions, critical questions around this topic. And Milton, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right.
Thank
you. So,
just ask a simple question.
A simple question.
Yes.
All right. So, what reforms to the global finance architecture should Africa push for as we go for COP31 and COP32, in line with the discussion of loss and damage finance? Thank you.
That's a tough one. But I think to begin with, looking at what my fellow panelists have already mentioned, I think we are, as Africa, we should be pushing for one, accessibility. Yeah, so the fund might be there, but how accessible is it? I think one of my colleagues already mentioned it. So the procedures that are usually put in place in these fundings becomes tough for countries in Africa to access the resources. Yes, we might be prepared, but the procedures, I think all of us must have a voice to say, let's look at the realities on the ground. And already one of my colleagues also mentioned that if the fund is similar to these other funds, and the issues of timeliness, especially when we talk about the big losses and the damages that we face nowadays, then we'll be back to square one. So the accessibility should be easy, but also be linking to the times and the needs that the local communities need. So in short, I think as Africa, we should be looking towards that. But especially here in Malawi, I think our voice should be pronounced, as my colleague has just mentioned here. All our negotiators should be going with the voice that the resources, one, they should be there, but they should also be accessed. Thank you. And be accessed in a timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Milton. Can we clap hands for Milton? I think I've answered the most difficult question, so I'm not going to ask you another question. I'm going to open the floor to the audience. If you have any question, please raise your hand. Those that are managing online, also please let us know if there's anyone else raising a hand online or making a comment. We have your panelists here available, starting from Harjeet and also Keith is around, Natasha, Charles. We also have Milton, but also my colleague Victor. So if you have any question, please raise your hand and ask your question. Because of time, be very straightforward to your point. Thank you. Can I see hands? I see one hand there, and then I see a second hand. Can someone help with the mic? Anyone else online? Not at the moment. I see a third hand. Can you go to the far corner, John, and then we'll come to this table for questions. So please be very short, succinct, and if you know maybe Harjeet is the one to respond, please refer the question to Harjeet or to Charles or anyone else. Thank you. We want to save time because there's another session after this one. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. Actually, you were taking much of my time. I would have finished by now. Well, my question is not necessarily going to a particular panelist, but I think perhaps it can go to all of them. My question really, I think it also talks or speaks to what, I think was it Martha was talking in the morning, regarding about thinking about the future, the children that we have. And we all know that all what we're doing and discussing here is about the future of our children. And I was just wondering, in view of the studies, for especially the research that was recently done by Save the Children, indicate that only 2% of the financing frameworks that we have at the moment, not to mention loss and damage, only 2% goes to children. That's projects that are child, focused. I'm wondering in this case, how do we want to advance reforms that are futuristic, but also ensuring that they're child-centric as well? Thank you.
Thank you, John. Maybe introduce yourself before you let the mic go.
My name is John Chipeta. I work with Save the Children.
Thank you. You have really spoken for the children. So can you come to this table? Just to also say that as we are talking about loss and damage in the keynotes, we also considered it as something that is happening now and in the future. So it's affecting us now, but it also affects us in the future. So children now, children in the future. Your second question?
Yes, thank you very much. My name once again is Beatrice Makwenda from Trust Africa, and I want to draw from our experiences on community philanthropy. And given that we are looking at modalities, probably the experiences on local resource mobilization, blending it with the other sources of income, where are these resources drawing from? And if we are to look at long-term resilience, we must be considering communities not just as beneficiaries, but also as contributors to these community disaster funds. Have you any experiences, and how then can we strengthen that participation, not just as beneficiaries, but also resourcing, hinting on community philanthropy? Thank you.
Thank you. And that question is going to who? is going to Zurich. Thank you. Yes, Martha.
Okay, so my question will go to any of the fund managers that have spoken. To what extent do you consider the principle of localization, that is funds to reach to communities, national governments, but also local governments, because these are local actors, local and national actors, community-based organizations, as directly as possible, if we use the term from the grand bargain, so that money is not lost in intermediary organizations, in international NGOs. Money is not lost in admin costs, for instance. So, I mean, have you put, for instance, a figure? How much should reach local and national actors as directly as possible? Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. I think we have 3 very important questions. Is there anyone else who wants to ask a question? I think this side is, I don't know. When we move on the carpet, red carpet, the left side is still not bubbling. Can you give the mic to Chris? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
Sorry, I couldn't see you. Go ahead.
yeah, mine is more of a comment.
Short one, right?
Among all the speakers, the issue of early warning, didn't hear it come out critically, but also within the early warning, being keen to invest and tap on the local knowledge, yeah, or what would be called also indigenous knowledge.
Thank you. Is there another hand? Yes.
Yeah.
Then we go to Chris.
Sharp, very fast. So for
Yeah.
me, my question goes to Natasha. Speaking on funding mechanism decentralized to the district level, I just wanted to ask, do we have a funding mechanism that has already been developed, or a legal framework that ring-fences maybe the funds that goes to the local level?
Thank you. That's a very important question on legal framework. Natasha, please. That's for you. Chris.
Hi everyone, Chris Connolly from Trocare. Charles, I think, mentioned that only 10% of climate finance is reaching communities. So we've seen we have the Community Development Fund mechanisms. What do you see as some practical steps we can take to increase that 10%?
All right, thank you. And I see one more hand, Geoff. And then we stop there because I don't see any additional hands.
I think
Yes.
one participant tackled the issue of management fees for administering organizations. Mine would do much on preparatory funds. You understand that some, for instance, infrastructure which may be damaged due to climate change related risks or perils might need some technical exercises to be conducted, detailed assessments, post disaster needs assessments. So with regards to financing for loss and damage, how do we intend to bring that on board? I have in mind other organizations like the Green Climate Fund. I think they do provide resources, especially for regional projects, for what they call project preparatory funds. Could it still be, could there be a window also under maybe the loss and damage if it's not there already? Thank you.
Thank you, Geoff. I think...
Sorry, maybe the last one.
All right.
Yeah, in line with the same. We're talking about loss and damage and possibly replenishment. Basically, it's about replenishing infrastructure or assets that were there that have been lost, mainly due to different perils. How do we think as maybe practitioners to avoid the risk of recurring financing of these interventions under loss and damage, you could possibly get funds to rebuild the school, or to rebuild a block, or to rebuild community assets, to build, to continue building community resilience. And then next season, the same infrastructure is washed away. How best can we ensure that we don't have such, what I would describe as maybe a race to the bottomless pit, or a resurgence of the vice, something like that, so that we don't keep on replenishing the same infrastructure or asset base that we try to rebuild after the occurrence of natural disasters? Thank you.
Thank you so much for all those questions, colleagues. And can I check one more time online? Is there anyone who wants to take? Oh. All right. So thanks. I think we have loaded questions, but also we are limited in terms of time. What I'm going to do is to ask all the panelists to say their final words by responding to one question or the next has been posed, but I also posed one question to all of you, so you can be able to respond while also responding to others, and that would be the last words as well in this panel. So I will ask this question to all of you. Should countries establish dedicated loss and damage units or mainstream existing DRM frameworks? And while we are responding to this question, please also take any of the questions that the floor has actually posed to you. So I'll start with the Hajit online, and let me give you the floor so that you can also do your parting shot. Thank you. Over to you. And let me go to Natasha on the same question. Should countries establish dedicated loss and damage units, or we should mainstream within the existing disaster risk management framework? And also, I think there was a specific question for you from the floor. Please take those questions. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I would like to agree with the previous speaker that the funds for responding to loss and damage doesn't need a separate unit. It should be mainstreamed in the existing structures, because this is just complementary funding. It's not something that is going to be there forever. So governments should have and should establish and also maintain funding mechanisms for loss and damage, and just have this as complementary funding mainstreamed in the existing funding mechanisms. Coming to the question on whether there are funding mechanisms at local level, at the moment there isn't, but there is a provision in the Disaster Risk Management Act for establishment of DRM Trust Fund, though not yet operationalized, because operationalization requires having regulations in place. So we have the regulations developed there, of course, in a draft form with the Minister of Justice reviewing them. But we are very hopeful that once the regulations are ready, DRM Trust Fund will be operationalized, and through this trust fund, the local level structures from the district to the local will have access to DRM funding, and they will do their own planning and implementation at that level. They will not wait for the central level to support them in any way, but they will have their own funding, so they will have their own work plans, implement activities, respond to emergencies, and even come up with their own disaster recovery projects. And also the Constituency Development Fund that government has put in place, there is 5 billion for each constituency. We are negotiating with the Minister of Local Government to have part of that fund allocated for disaster risk management. If we are successful, that means there will be a percentage out of that Constituency Development Fund strictly for disaster risk management that will be implemented in each and every constituency. So that's the prospective funding mechanisms for local level disaster risk management. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Let's give a round of applause as I transition to Victor. If you have a specific question from the audience, please deal with that, but also help us to respond to this question: should countries establish a dedicated loss and damage unit, or mainstream within the existing framework? Thank you.
Thanks, Julius. I'll start with the later. I think probably it's neither the issue isn't really having either a separate unit or not. The challenge is when you say mainstream, sometimes you lose focus. So the bigger issue that is needed, in my opinion, is you need dedicated focus on this issue in these early stages. Because if you look at the magnitude of the losses and the damages, they are far bigger than the funds that are actually raised as part of disaster response, recovery, whatever. Because most of these damages, some of them are intangible, but they are massive, they are irreversible. And you are losing things that, if you lose lives of people like we've seen happening, loss of cultural identity, a loss of institutional memory, or community memory for that matter, all these kind of losses. There is minimal research, minimal focus on it. Having a dedicated unit would help unpack a lot of these issues, do more studies around it. So it will need dedicated resources. So a unit, I don't say it in the beginning would be better. If you mainstream it, I would simply say, nonetheless, within that framework, it must have significant attention. Because loss and damage, as we have seen, is beyond adaptation and mitigation. So I would say that. I wanted to touch on a question John raised about the dilemma we are facing here, or even a discrepancy, as it were, where children are the future and the focus, but in our programming and resourcing, they are minimally covered in terms of programming. It's, and they are here in the rooms, those who are here in one of the tables. I wanted just to say we need to revisit our programming. We need a reset. And I'm talking from experience. We just had an intervention where we sat down with children 3 weeks ago. After working for about 2 decades in some disaster-affected communities, the things the children said in that afternoon, in that focus group discussion, none of the adults has ever said. None at all. They raised issues no one has ever raised. That completely will redefine how we do programming. So I feel that we need that kind of shift, one inclusion that leads to listening to the children, hearing from them. And when we design these solutions, that they are part and parcel, they know much more than we think they do. And they have a much bigger stake into the future than we actually do. I wanted just to add that, but thanks so much for having me part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victor. He deserves a round of applause. As I also call upon Charles to say your parting words. If you had a specific question, please address that, but also help us understand whether countries should establish dedicated loss and damage units or mainstream within the existing framework. Thank you. Over to you.
So thank you so much, Julius. There was one question that was addressed to me by our colleague from Trocare, and it's a very good question because he's asking what are some of the practical steps that we can actually be able to take to ensure that we actually change the paradigm in a way that we have more resources flowing to the frontline communities, rather than all of it, of course, getting lost within the bureaucracies that are systematically established. I want to say that we must encourage as much as possible direct access modalities for any kind of fund, whether we are talking of GCA, where it's loss and damage, and whichever other funds that do exist. That is very, very important. But I think we have also had some good examples of how we can actually be able to improve our project designs to ensure that we are focused more on the communities at the front line. And also give an example of a program that is operational in Kenya. Probably you could be aware of FROCA program, financing locally led climate action. It is a unique program, and I think other countries are actually benchmarking on what Kenya has been piloting, whereby there is a kitty established within Treasury, and donors are putting money in that kitty, World Bank, the Danish government, the governments of Netherlands and others. But that money, in Kenya we have what we call, devolved system of governance. So that we have the national government, but we also have the county governments. And the county governments have some level of autonomy. And what is happening is that the money that is coming from the donors to facilitate that program is actually held by Treasury. But Treasury devolves now those resources to the county governments. But the county governments are required by law to actually first of all establish climate policies that would actually enable, of course, operationalization of that particular fund at the county level. But most importantly, they establish a dedicated account so that that money is not actually mixed with any other money, and that money comes directly to the county in that particular account. But not even the governor of the county can dictate how that money is going to be utilized. How that money is utilized, the decisions are actually made at what we call the ward level. Because from national government we have counties, and from counties we have ward level. And ward level are actually the lowest administrative units within the devolved system of governance. And within that ward, we have a committee. And every committee has actually a diversity of representation. Talk about women, talk about people living with disabilities, indigenous people, and so on and so forth. They are represented within that ward committee. They are the ones who make decisions in terms of what kind of a project they want in that ward. And the county administration has got no authority to do anything else but to actually push the money or actually unlock the money to that particular project. Now that's a very good system where money is coming fine through a government system, but it's actually decisions are actually made at the ground, and that is where the money is going without necessarily, you know, the red tape and the bureaucracies that actually could actually come in place to basically have the resources diverted and so on and so forth. So that kind of a model can actually be adopted, you know, in other countries. It can be adopted for different kinds of funds, including this loss and damage fund. It is possible, you know, to use that kind of a modality to ensure that money goes to the grassroots. But beyond that, we also have other funds that are actually being run by other institutions. For instance, we have what we call the Climate Justice Impact Fund for Africa, ESPACJA. And we are saying that we are funding the unfundables. In this case, we are funding small youth groups, small women groups who may not be able to develop what GCF we call bankable proposals. And we give some bit of seed money, but that seed money is actually doing wonders on the ground. You know, because they're able to utilize those resources and they're able, you know, to cause some kind of transformation within their locality. So it's important to ensure that we have all these diversities, but most importantly, design the projects in a way that the money and decision making is happening at the very local level. Now, having mentioned that, I also want to address the question that was raised by our colleague from Save the Children. It is true, the children constituency has been neglected for a long, long time, and I think in year 2023 and 2024, we had a project with Save the Children, and we were really trying really to really profile, you know, the needs of children within the climate space. And I think we came up with a guide, which I think we published, which is on children, you know, rights, you know, on climate change. And I think it's a document that brings about, you know, issues of children and how we need now to also integrate, you know, some of their requirements and needs, you know, within that particular space. But having said that, we have to look at the children and the youth in a different perspective. Remember, they are the majority in Africa, for example. And therefore, we must also not look at them as victims, like what Beatrice mentioned, but also as change agents. But how do they become change agents without the requisite skills and instruments to enable them, of course, be those agents we are talking about? And therefore, we must craft, you know, capacity building program. And we have one at PACJA, you know, what we call the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice, which is a program that is dedicated to young people and which we are actually, you know, utilizing in terms of shaping, you know, the minds of our young people, but also giving them the tools that they actually need to become change agents. And we're getting to see young people, of course, you know, becoming very innovative, very creative, and even taking senior positions in different, you know, institutions, you know, and actually playing their role in terms of them being change agents and contributing to the change that we actually need. At the same time, I know there is an innovation, youth innovation hub on climate action, which is actually being run by AU, but also in partnership with us. And last year, during the Africa Climate Summit, we got to hear from 80 young people with very innovative ideas, you know, that are actually very transformational, and those ideas need to be supported so that they contribute, you know, to the change that we want to see. They contribute to climate action rather than just looking at them as change agents. And lastly, when we have these conversations around, for example, loss and damage, the victims or the most vulnerable will always be women and children. And therefore, even as we design projects or programs to respond to loss and damage, we must also ensure that we integrate the needs of the children in those designs. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles, for those wonderful closing remarks. I want to transition to Milton to also have your final words by responding to the questions, but also this question that I posed regarding whether we need a dedicated unit or we need to mainstream issues of loss and damage in the existing frameworks. Over to you.
Thank you so much, moderator. I think on the issue of a standalone designated authority, I also go by the views that my colleague Victor mentioned, because most of the times when we talk of mainstreaming, sometimes we really lose out the essence of why we want to follow up with certain issues, and in this case, the loss and damage fund. So to me, I would propose that there should be that flexibility to have a standalone designated authority, not creating other hierarchies. I think I should also mention that. Then I will attempt the question of having preparatory funds. I think one of the colleagues also mentioned there. I think in anything that we do, preparatory funding is extremely important. And actually, most of the institutions even fail to access any fund because they don't have the capacity even to move on with one step. So preparatory funding in any case, and especially for the loss and damage fund, is extremely important. And I think as Africa, we need to advocate that there should be more funds, readily accessible, but also include an aspect of preparatory fund. Having said that, I would also want to thank you, moderator, for the great opportunity to be on this panel and to share little experiences. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milton. He also deserves a round of applause. Paul, do you want to say something? You are the one who actually sparked this debate because of your presentation. So if you have anything you want to say as a final word after this panel, you have this floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there was a question directly for myself, so I think I can address that one. It was in relation to, is there a place for community philanthropy within community-based pooled funds, if I understand correctly, and in our case, the community disaster funds. Maybe I'll start by saying that Concern's global mandate and our mandate within Malawi is to target people living in extreme poverty, and the extension of that is the most vulnerable communities. We target with Zurich alongside government, DODMA and the district to look at the communities who are most vulnerable to flood risks. As a result of that, you're looking at some of the most vulnerable households and communities in the country, and there are inherent challenges with that in terms of accessing philanthropy. With that said, I mentioned during my presentation as well that it's really important that we look at communities as active financial actors. So I think that there are ways over time to overcome those, let's say, inherent challenges of the people and the communities that we target. So one way is building their financial and compliance capacity. So we set up bank accounts for community disaster fund committees, which exist within, which are drawn from existing structures already. And we provide training on proposal development so they can access their own funding outside of the funding mechanism that exists already. I think we're looking at ways that we can build in revolving funds, the ways that we can build in if you, for example, are providing an irrigation scheme which allows farmers to move away from recurrent flood areas to lower risk areas. Is there a way that we can take some of that profit and channel it back into a revolving fund and these bank accounts for community, for operation and maintenance, and for expansion of what we're able to do. Also, I think what's really important is, and I just kind of thought of this as you mentioned it, you know, philanthropy can come in many ways, and I think what we really see is huge community contributions from CDF, which is a form of local philanthropy in itself. So I showed the Padalao dike, and I actually visited during the period whenever they were doing the dike construction, and it was incredible to see the level of community contribution that was happening. They had dozens of people from different communities each day over, I think, about a 2-week period that came to physically build the wall, so different groups of people from a large geographic area surrounding. They had local artisans that we trained through Build Back Better that were advising on the quality of the construction. You had people bringing rocks from miles away, and then really the cost incurred was the transportation. So you're also lowering the cost, so the ability for that, let's say, financial sustainability and eventual philanthropy to come through is also increased. And I think as well, by over time, by building resilience, by having recovery faster, shocks lessened through the resilience building, the ability over time, if you build the financial inclusion and financial sustainability of these groups and these communities, you ensure that over time they're able to earn an income from their land because there's less flooding, etc., etc. Over time, you can then build, and also the fact that it's a community-driven, it's not called intervention, but a community-driven development approach. You might assume, and from the evidence that we've seen, that philanthropy will follow. So, you know, and maybe the classic way that we would think about philanthropy. So that's kind of a long way of answering your question. But I think if you get the fundamentals right at the beginning and have it genuinely community-driven, you can reap many types of in-kind philanthropic benefits from it. And then, if I may, I'm probably the least well placed to answer the question on existing versus dedicated, but just a reflection I had, and I took a lot of notes when everyone was making their earlier comments, is access is what every single person on the panel mentioned. And the thing that most mentioned also was speed. So, you know, as far as I understand the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage, and particularly the Barbados modalities, where they differentiate themselves, and particularly the Barbados modalities, is the speed, or the expected speed of delivery and access to those funds. But if you don't have the use of every available existing structure, that access and that speed will not happen. So I think my reflection is, as much as possible, there may be gaps, and those gaps may need to be filled. And and I had a thought, you also can't skip, like we talk about CDFs being a genuinely community-driven modality for accessing loss and damage, but that access can only happen if there's a flow all the way down from DODMA through the DRM Act, I hope through the DRM Trust Fund, through district structures who we get advice from in terms of the communities we should work with, the vulnerabilities they have, the plans that they already have in place, and then build on top of those. If we didn't have those, we'd either give it to the wrong people at the wrong time, doing the wrong things. And you're not going to build systems by skipping all of that. So yeah, I think as much as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let me thank my panelists Keith. I thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Ajit. Thank you, Melton. And thank you, Victor, for taking your time to share with us those valuable insights. We are going to take it from here. If I was in the negotiation, I was going to say I'm going to look at all this and then develop another session for all of you, and then we should sit down and especially the last question about whether we need a dedicated unit or mainstreaming, because I saw different responses to this question. So colleagues, let's give a round of applause to my panelists, and thank you so much for your time. You can stand, let's have a photo, and yeah, we can see you, Hajit, but we need Keith on the screen so that we can take a family photo and then we close the session. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I leave the podium to Obed, who's going to lead us into the next session. Obed, you have the floor. Thank you.
All right. I know we are very tired. We have one last session. We promised to make it very, very short. We were actually almost postponing it to tomorrow, but some of the panelists may not be around, and we promised that we will finish in the next 30 to 45 minutes, if you don't mind. So I would like to invite all of us to stand, first of all, and I want to give Vincent. Can you give us an energizer, please?
Okay, let us stand up. I can see some of us are struggling to stand up. Okay, the energizer is very simple. Because Obed said guys are tired, I will not be the one making you more tired. So we are just going to stretch. I know we've been sitting for so long. So just find some space and stretch the best way you know how. Yeah, I'm seeing very funny styles, but it's okay if that makes you happy. Okay, thank you. So let us just then resume our seats. And I hope we concentrate for the 30 or 45 minutes that we have. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincent. I think the next session is also going to pick up from where the previous session left. So you'll be hearing a lot of similar interventions just to build up on what we were discussing in the previous session. And so we are going to discuss or unpack country experiences on accessing loss and damage financing in readiness for the Barbados implementation modalities. Are we together? Hello? Are we together? If you're together with me, please raise your hand. Yes. If we can close our computers, I know you have a lot of work. For this last session, if you want us to finish early, please help us finish early. Yeah, please let's focus. Yeah, so as we know, in COP30, countries or parties launched, the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage launched the Barbados implementation modality. So we want to hear what is this modality? What is it about? And is it fit for purpose for Africa? So, or are we at risk of really designing yet another mechanism that does not reach those who need it the most? Because we are talking about access to funding for responding to loss and damage. And this is the very first sort of mechanism or pilot under the fund that actually going to ensure that money for loss and damage is accessed to those who need it the most. So in terms of the objectives of this session, we will try to assess the suitability of the BIM or the Barbados implementation modality for delivering loss and damage finance to African countries and vulnerable communities. We will also try to discuss the key gaps and propose solutions to enhance its effectiveness and accessibility. We will try also to draw lessons from other climate and disaster finance mechanisms to strengthen the delivery of the loss and damage finance, and of course explore strategies to overcome the barriers. I know next month there's going to be a board meeting for the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage in Zambia, and I think this session is also going to be key in drawing or coming up with the recommendations that actually can inform the board meeting next month in Zambia. So I hope you will be able to take in and also provide input. To start us off, maybe in the next 10 minutes, I would like to invite again Natasha Zalira from the Department of Disaster Management Affairs to make a short expert presentation on making the BIM modality deliver for Africa countries and vulnerable communities. So as you listen to this presentation, I would like you to reflect on the 3 key questions. What problem is the modality really trying to solve? Where might it fall short for Africa? And what must change urgently to make it work? So without wasting time, Natasha, over to you, please. Thank you so much. Please, let's give a round of applause as she comes to the podium. I can see who is not clapping. Please, let's clap for Natasha as she comes to the podium. Thank you so much. Over to you, Natasha.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Yeah, so I'm going to take you through a very brief presentation on making the Barbados implementation modality deliver for Africa countries and the vulnerable communities. So that's the outline of the presentation. I'm going to talk about Africa losses and damages, the Malawi disaster risk profile, major disasters, why we need BIM as Africa and Malawi, as well as how we can make BIM deliver in Africa and Malawi. As a way of introduction, just to give you a picture, which we all know, that Africa is particularly vulnerable to climate change more than in other countries or continents in the world. And also we have a large share of the population that lives below the poverty line. And our economies in Africa are extremely sensitive to climate change, weather conditions, and they also largely rely on agriculture. When there's an emergency, whether it's drought, floods, it doesn't just affect the population in terms of impacting lives, but also our economies are highly affected because when we lose crop and the crop production declines, even our GDP also declines. So Africa is exposed to common hazards, which include flooding, drought, cyclones, heat waves, as well as pest and disease outbreaks. Talking of Ebola, talking of polio, it's all in Africa. You rarely hear about this in other parts of the world. And to make it everything complex, we have limited adaptive capacity and also serious financial gaps. Literature shows that Africa loses billions annually, billions of dollars due to these hazards. And between 145 to 170 million people are affected by climate shocks every year. And also 70% of the damages are due to floods. Losses and damages in terms of infrastructure was up to $12 billion every year. And when there's an emergency that affects crops, it means there's a reduction on production and also a reduction in GDP growth. Focusing on Malawi, as a country, these are the common hazards that we are exposed to. And lately, maybe for the past decade, we have seen an increase in the frequency as well as severity of disasters. And this is mainly due to climate change. And our vulnerability also is compounded by the reliance on rain-fed agriculture, which is the backbone of our economy. And that makes our economy highly sensitive to climate shocks. And we also have experienced recurring vulnerabilities with low adaptive capacity. Maybe for the past 5 years, we have been hit by more than 5 cyclones, 3 of which had very devastating impacts. And every time we are affected by a disaster, especially of high magnitude, when we start undertaking recovery interventions, we don't finish before we are hit by another cyclone or an emergency of high magnitude. Just to give you a snapshot of the impacts, the past from between 2015 to 2023, we had 6 major disaster events. And in all these 6 major disaster events, there was a declaration of state of disaster, meaning that the impact was so overwhelming that as a country, together with all the partners within the country, we are not able to cope, we're not able to respond and recover. So the president had to call for external support. So in 2015, we had Cyclone Chedza that affected the country, and According to the statistics, 1.1 million people were affected, of which 230,000 were displaced. And 2016, we had the dry spell that affected the whole of southern region, and this came soon after flooding caused by Cyclone Cheza, and it affected 5.8 million people. And we had in 2019 Cyclone Idai that affected almost 1 million people again and displaced 90,000. And in 2022 we had Cyclone Gombe and the Tropical Storm Anna that also affected 1 million people. And in 2023 we had the worst flooding caused by Cyclone Freddy, and the 2.2 million people were affected, whilst almost 700,000 were displaced. So you can see it was just a space of 8 years and affected by 6 major disaster events. But also to say that it was not just these major events. In between, we also had other small disaster events that also took place. This is just a picture of how many lives were lost in that period due to the cyclones. Coming to losses and damages, between 2015 and 2023, Malawi lost 1.4 billion US dollars due to climatic disasters, and the recovery needs were exceeding 2 billion US dollars. Just to give you a picture of the impact in terms of losses and damages of each cyclone, in 2015, the impact when it was calculated and quantified, it was 335 million US dollars. But in that 2015, we needed 494 million US dollars to recover. 2016, we needed 500 million US dollars to recover from the impact of drought. And the 2019 cyclone Idai, we needed 370 million US dollars, and 2023 Cyclone Freddy, we needed 680 US dollars. So as I was saying, that we've been having incomplete cycles of recovery, because within these 8 years, we had lost a lot, and we required a lot of resources to recover, which we could not raise as a country. So why does BIM matter for Africa and Malawi? As already presented, Africa and Malawi is affected by disasters. We have recurrent vulnerabilities. Our economies are high risk, climate sensitive, and we also have incomplete recovery cycles. So with all this in mind, BIM will really help us, matters a lot, because it provides dedicated climate finance. We may all know that the funding allocation for less developed countries is 20 million, ranges from 5 million to 20 million US dollars. So each country can submit a funding request of that much, and it also ensures that Malawi as a country has access to these resources to support recovery interventions due to climate impact. And it also provides rapid response to climate disasters, because this funding is available and can be accessed immediately after a disaster has occurred, to support recovery interventions. And also provides an opportunity for global and regional solidarity, because there is opportunity for partnership. Countries can partner and submit a joint proposal. And even within the country, ministries and other partners can also go into a joint proposal and submit. So this promotes regional partnership by allowing joint submission, and also equity by recognizing the disproportionate impact of climate change on developing nations. And finally, we need the BIM, and it matters a lot to us as Africa and Malawi, because it also provides operational framework for loss and damage. It has set rules for financing, disbursement, as well as accountability under this funding, and also helps Africa nations to streamline access for funding emergencies. How can we make BIM deliver in Africa? First and foremost, it is very important to prioritize direct access for African governments. So the funding for responding for loss and damage provides an opportunity to national governments to access funds and also partner with other stakeholders during implementation. It also integrates with regional. We need to also integrate the BIM with the regional and the national disaster risk management and financing strategies. We should not take it as the only source of funding for recovery interventions, but national government should have their own designated funding to address the losses and damages and recover from the same. And this should just be complementary. So if we do that, we are going to make the BIM deliver. BIM only provides for $20 million, but as I've presented in the previous slides, like for example, in Malawi, we need $680 million to recover from the impacts of Cyclone Freddy. So this is just 20 million. It means this is nothing just but a drop in what in our recovery needs. So to rely on this funding, it means we will not achieve anything, we will not recover from not even a single impact on a sector. But we need to use this just to complement the existing financing strategies. So as a region, we need to align it with like SADC financing mechanisms, ECOWAS, as well as the DRM funds within our respective countries. And also we have to ensure that these funds, when we are planning, they should reach vulnerable communities very quickly, because these are the people that suffer the impacts of any disaster that affect the country. So the intervention should target and directly benefit vulnerable communities. For Malawi, as a case study, when the BIM was announced the launch of the Fund for Responding for Loss and Damage in November last year, this was an exciting news. And when he came back from COP30, we immediately constituted an interministerial task team to champion the drafting of a funding request project proposal. So by then, the criteria for accessing this funding was not very clear, especially in terms of how many funding requests can a country submit. It was until last week when this was clarified. And we also partnered with UNDP because it requires that we should have an agency that is accredited to access the funding. So we opted for UNDP, and we started working with the UNDP. Then we proceeded to have national consultation on the current status of recovery interventions in the country, mainly to understand the recovery interventions being implemented, existing gaps, as well as the priorities, national priorities. So we invited partners from UN agencies, academia, NGOs, as well as the government ministries, departments, and agencies. So we got data on what is being implemented, who is funding what and where. Then after this, we went to district councils to do the same consultation, just to complement the data we collected at the national level. And this happened, and we have the information with us. Then UNDP also supported the process. Since their fund is highly competitive, and we need to submit a project proposal that adheres to BIM guidelines and the selection criteria, as well as that is technically sound. So UNDP supported us by hiring a consultant who is working with the task team, the interministerial task team, and we are currently drafting the proposal, and the focus is on the sectors and interventions that will directly benefit the vulnerable communities. And also these sectors have not received enough funding in terms of addressing the recovery needs. So the challenges that we are experiencing as Africa and Malawi, there's inadequate data to support the project proposal. It's a requirement that the proposal that will be submitted should be backed by evidence. So data is scarce because for recovery interventions to be quantified, losses and damages to be quantified, there's need to undertake the post-disaster needs assessment. So I've presented five or six major disaster events, 5 major disaster events with losses and the recovery requirements because there's data. But those are not the only disasters that have affected the country. Others are not recorded, like the losses from other disasters are not recorded because the PDNA was not conducted. The PDNA is expensive and it requires a lot of expertise. And previously, we used to have external experts come in to support us. It's only in 2023 that we started doing the PDNA on our own, but there's still capacity gap. And because we are not able to quantify the losses, damages, as well as the recovery interventions, it's difficult to submit a proposal, a winning proposal, because of lack of data. And also lack of technical experts to conduct the PDNA. We have limited awareness and technical expertise on how to access the funding. This was also already mentioned in other presentations. And also there is insufficient funding relative to needs. Like I said, we need from 2023 Cyclone Freddy alone, we need $680 million to recover. But what is available is very little. So we cannot, even if we have like several funding opportunities, but I don't think they can provide the whole $680 million. So because of the high vulnerabilities of communities due to the recurring disasters, we have insufficient funding, also incomplete recovery cycles and weak institutional capacity. So recommendation both to Malawi and African countries, we need to strengthen technical capacity and local governance structures, because this is the funding that has to target local people. And if you are taking the resources to the local people, we need to build their capacities. They should know how to plan, how to budget, how to implement, and also to liquidate, and also accountability to the affected people. We also need to improve climate data system, like provide the data from PDNAs and other assessments, and invest in area warning to inform decision making, and strengthen local resilience by promoting local driven interventions. In conclusion, I'd say that Africa loses billions annually, and Malawi is an example for urgent need for funding, having financial gaps. And the BIM represents a historic step in climate finance delivery in Africa, and we need to strategically engage each other as national agency partners as well as countries in Africa, so that we should collaborate and access the funding and implement recovery intervention that benefits the local people. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Please, let's give her a better clap. Again, thank you. Natasha, I would like to invite you to the floor. Please have a seat. We won't have panelists joining her. I would like us to dedicate this session to Q&A. As you prepare your questions to Natasha, I would like to invite only one panelist who is online by the name Sheila. But of course, just to remind us what Natasha said, I think it's very, very important. Thank you, Natasha. I think you've made it short and sweet, but also quite insightful. You've reminded us, of course, the huge needs, especially amount of money that has been lost by the disasters, especially with in Malawi only, to the tune of 1.4 billion US dollar. And that actually really paints the picture of the enormous amount of money that is required to address loss and damage. Yet, within the BIM, we only have $250 million. Okay. And then you've also talked about integrating the BIM with other regional and national disaster risk management financing strategies, which is very, very important, owing to the inadequacy of the funding. And also, you also touched on the challenges, especially in terms of inadequate data to support project proposals and limited awareness and technical capacity. And that's where, of course, bodies like the Santiago Network really come in to catalyze that technical assistance. So as you prepare your questions to Natasha, please reflect on this question as well. If you had, I hope you can hear me, colleagues, if you had immediate access to significant loss and damage finance today, what is the biggest barrier that will still prevent effective delivery at national or subnational level? So as you reflect on that, please prepare your question to Natasha. But allow me to invite Sheila Pini, who works with ActionAid, to reflect on this question. Sheila, if you can hear me. Looking at the broader climate finance architecture, of course you've had the presentation from Natasha. What structural reforms do you think are needed to ensure that the mechanisms like the BIM are not only well designed, but also deliver timely, predictable, and adequate finance to African countries? You can reflect on that before we also invite you with follow-up questions. If you can hear me, please go ahead and make your interventions. Thank you. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much.
capable of conducting a BDNA. So that is part of the interventions in the proposal that is being developed. And for the incorporated recovery cycles, I don't know how best we can address this, because disasters that we experience usually from as a result of cyclones, which we cannot stop, we cannot prevent, we can only try to mitigate its impact. But what I can say is that we should build strong structures that are resilient to the impact of, say, for example, floods that are caused by disasters. So we should always have to incorporate the Build Back Better concept when we are reconstructing, and also build the capacity of communities to undertake community-based or community-owned mitigation measures that can also support them withstand the impact of disasters, especially those that have very devastating impacts. But this one is difficult as long as we are still exposed to cyclones and suffer the impacts. But trying to mitigate, we can do these recommended interventions. A message to the board. Yeah, I think they should build capacity of countries, especially by orienting them on how they should do craft or develop the proposal so that they should get financed, because it will be very disappointing to see a number of countries fail to get the funding because the proposal did not meet the requirements. So if they can orient us and equip us with all the knowledge that we need to develop a winning proposal, that will be great, because it means all of us will access the resources and will go a long way in addressing some of the recovery needs that are very key in our country.
Thank you so much. Please, let's clap for Natasha and Sheila. I think this has been a very short and sweet session, just a teaser, and we will be continuing these conversations tomorrow and the day after, just to unpack some of these issues that have come up. But of course, the BIM is really, it may be insufficient, but it's a good start. It's a good opportunity that we all need to see how we can tap. It's not only limited to governments, but including NGOs and other entities are actually eligible to apply, as long as you can partner with an accredited entity. But of course, with time, we need to have simple and easy access modalities for communities without necessarily passing through those who are accredited. But of course, the issue of capacity also keeps coming. And we know now the Santiago network on loss and damage is fully operational. And actually, the latest, the most application for capacity, technical capacity has actually come from the African countries. I'm not sure whether Malawi has made an application for technical capacity to Santiago network. And I think these are very, very low-lying fruit that we can also tap into as we talk about capacity. But of course, other recommendations that have come up are issues of institutional and technical, technology and data infrastructure, issues of data, issues of ensuring that the funds get to the community, accountability and feedback mechanisms, which are very, very important. So, colleagues, I think, in short, I would like us to leave us with 3 key reflections, which are very, very important. We may actually design mechanism, and which is really, really good, but designing is not just enough. Delivery is the actually the real test. How does this money, how do these mechanisms actually benefit those who need the most at the local level? So delivering is very, very important. And these barriers may not only be just technical, they also may be institutional and even political. And it's also very important to acknowledge that. And if this finance does not reach those who need it at the subnational level, at the community level, then we have not solved the problem. I think I would like to leave us with those parting shots. And thank you so much for listening to us. And please clap for us as we finish. Thank you so much. So I would like to invite my one member panelist, and Sheila, please if you can turn on your video for a quick photo as we finish, as I invite the moderator for the day to help us close the day. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Sheila, we are taking the photo. Please pause. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sheila. Enjoy your evening.
Yeah, thank you so much, Obed, and thank you, Natasha and Sheila. Can we give them a round of applause as they sit? And I think that winds up our day, and I think it has been a very productive day for all of us. Discussed a lot of things, and we've received a lot of messages. As a team that is trying to consolidate messages, reports, but also a communique, I think we have a very tough job to do tonight. While you're sleeping, we are going to be synthesizing the messages. So just to thank all of you for being very a wonderful audience, please clap for yourself. We will need your energy tomorrow to discuss further on some of the issues that are still remaining. Remember, we here to focus on financing, but also focus on technical assistance. So, and these are two streams as far as loss and damage is concerned. We need technical assistance, but we also need financing. Tomorrow, mostly we'll be talking about the technical assistance. So please come prepared that we are going to be discussing modalities regarding technical assistance. Of course, there's going to be one more session that will focus on financing, just to wrap up, but mostly we'll talk about technical assistance. We also have a chance to go into 3 breakaway sessions, which will also focus on first, technical assistance, secondly, the issue of data and knowledge management, and then thirdly, we'll be talking about gender and social inclusion. Children, I hope you're going to be here tomorrow to discuss your issues. And also a very, very important session, if we talk about technical assistance but also financing, there is also this issue about Martha was talking about compensation. That was the beginning of this whole conversation about loss and damage. So how do we want to still advance that issue of requesting for compensation and reparations? So we're also going to have a panel discussion and some presentation around that topic, so that we should also be able to interrogate these issues and see where we are in if there are any opportunities that we can that can open up for us to even sue, or I don't know whether we can be sued, but we need to sue some other governments or some other institutions for not doing their job or for not doing their fair share, as Martha said. So having said that, I want to sincerely thank you for taking your time, your contributions, and I want to call this meeting for today closed, and we meet again tomorrow at 8:30. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. We just need a team of rapporteurs to remain here, and the rest of us. So we will need a team of rapporteurs and those that are going to help us to start synthesizing these messages to remain in here. The rest of us, have a good evening. We'll see you tomorrow at 8:30 in this room. Thank you. Please do not leave the tea. Drink the tea and eat the snacks.
1, 2. Listen to Vega. Hello? Excuse me, participants. If some of us are pretty sure have not been assisted in regards to logistics, in respect of fuel refund and the likes, please find the finance team on that corner over there. Please find the finance team on that corner over there if you have not been assisted in regards to logistics. Thank you.